The history of the United States, it's huge, right? It's this sprawling, often contradictory story. So what we're going to do today is boil it all down to its core idea, the story of an experiment. Let's dive in.
So, can a nation be an idea? I mean, really think about that. This question is right at the heart of the American story. You hear it all the time, right? The American experiment, this big test to see if a country can actually be built on ideals like liberty and equality. But, like any experiment, the results, well, they've been complicated and honestly, often pretty messy.
And to really get a grip on this experiment, you have to look at this massive timeline. Our story doesn't just kick off in 1776. No way. It starts thousands of years before that, and it's still going, right up to this very moment.
Okay, so to really get this, we've got to rewind, way back. We have to start long before the experiment officially began, on a continent that was already home to countless nations of its own.
See, this continent wasn't empty, far from it. It was home to countless diverse and, frankly, sophisticated indigenous nations. We're talking about vast trade networks that crisscrossed all of North America. Complex cities like the ones built by the mound builders in the Mississippi Valley. These were societies that had been governing themselves for millennia. This was the world before the experiment ever started.
Then, everything changed. The arrival of European ships set a whole new series of events in motion. Events that would change this world forever and launch this wild experiment in democracy.
So, starting in the 1600s, you have British colonies popping up all along the East Coast. People were coming for all sorts of reasons: land, money, religious freedom. But as these colonies got bigger, something else started to grow too. This feeling of self-government, this real frustration with being told what to do from an ocean away. And that tension, that's what set the stage for a revolution.
And that revolution, it basically happened in three huge steps. First, in 1776, the colonies declared their independence. Bam! Then, after a long, hard-fought war, they actually won their freedom. And then, in 1787, they did something totally radical. They wrote a constitution. They created a whole new kind of government based on a document, not on a king.
And this right here, this was the central idea, the main hypothesis of the entire American experiment. It was a completely revolutionary statement, saying that your rights in your government shouldn't be based on who your parents were or some divine right. No, they should be based on this self-evident truth that all of humanity is equal.
But, and this is a huge but, right here is where the experiment slammed into its first and maybe its biggest contradiction. While the nation's founders were talking about equality, the absolutely brutal institution of slavery was woven deep into the economy and society. And that ideal of liberty? It definitely didn't extend to the native nations, who were systematically forced off their ancestral lands.
And yet, for all its flaws, the framework they built, it lasted. I mean, think about this. The U.S. Constitution, written way back in 1787, is the oldest written national constitution still being used today. That's a real testament to the durability and maybe the adaptability of the experiment's design.
All right, so the 19th century. This century would push that new constitutional framework to its absolute breaking point. It was the ultimate test of whether the experiment could even survive its own internal contradictions.
You've probably heard the phrase from Abraham Lincoln himself, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." Well, in the 1800s, the United States was, without a doubt, a house divided.
It's so interesting because, on one hand, the country was just exploding in size. The Louisiana Purchase literally doubled it overnight, and cities up north were becoming industrial powerhouses. But all that growth came at a huge cost. It led to the forced removal of native peoples, and most critically, it just kept deepening that impossible, irreconcilable divide over the issue of slavery.
Eventually, that division just blew up. In 1861, the Civil War began. It tore the nation apart. But the Union's victory in 1865 finally abolished slavery. The period that came next, which we call Reconstruction, was this massive attempt to rebuild the country and somehow integrate 4 million newly freed people into the promise of America.
And this really gets at the struggle of Reconstruction perfectly. On one side, you have this incredible effort to build a totally new society, with voting rights and constitutional amendments. But on the other side, you have these powerful forces doing everything they can to tear it all down. And while there are some amazing gains, that resistance in the end rolled a lot of them back, leaving this legacy of inequality that it would take another 100 years to really confront again.
So as the nation turns the page into the 20th century, it goes through another huge transformation. It goes from being this divided, mostly agricultural society into a global industrial power. And that forced the experiment to expand once again.
And at the heart of this huge change, people. Just look at this number. Over 12 million immigrants passed through Ellis Island alone. They provided the labor, the energy, the cultural dynamism that fueled the nation's incredible industrial growth.
This was one of the most profound shifts in American life ever. Millions and millions of people moved from rural farms into these booming, chaotic industrial cities. It completely reshaped everything: the economy, the culture, the actual physical landscape of the country.
And out on the world stage, the United States was stepping into a totally new role. Its involvement and ultimate victory in 2 world wars really cemented its status as a leading global power. And that set the stage for a whole new kind of global struggle, the Cold War, which would last for decades.
Meanwhile, back at home, the experiment was being pushed and expanded on 2 huge fronts. You have the civil rights movement demanding that the nation finally live up to its own founding words, fighting to dismantle segregation and secure voting rights for everybody. And at the same time, you've got this incredible technological ambition of the space race, pushing the absolute boundaries of what anyone thought was possible, and it all culminates with landing on the moon, a really powerful symbol of national achievement.
And that brings us right up to today, because the experiment didn't end in 1969, or any other year for that matter. It's still going on right now with a whole new set of challenges and questions for us to figure out.
Today, we've got this new set of interconnected challenges that are testing the experiment all over again. You know, debates over technology, globalization, that persistent inequality, immigration, America's role in the world. These aren't just separate issues. They all pull on the very same foundational questions of what liberty, equality, and national identity really mean.
So let's just recap the arc of this whole story. Where did we start? With diverse indigenous nations. Then it's founded on this revolutionary constitutional experiment. It's nearly broken in half by internal division in the Civil War. And then it's continually reshaped by these ongoing struggles for justice and a changing role in the world.
See, the history of the United States isn't just some story about the past that's over and done with. It's an ongoing process. And that leaves us with one final, and I think really crucial question. The experiment continues, so what part are you going to play in shaping its future?